If we consider ethics, they are interpersonal. In the true reality of a Buddhist understanding, this would raise problems if there's only one. If all is one, then even if the one is what we think of as a person, that they, he, it, she, has nothing to relate to, because all is what they are. He is everything. So ethics don't arise in the true reality. It's only pertinent, apparently, to the apparent reality, where there are separate individuals, and, for instance, perhaps it's a good idea to love them as ourselves. That might be a principle, a moral principle. Love them as ourselves. You have to argue then in the Buddhist understanding that morality is valid because you live in an apparent reality, even though it isn't true reality. And the best way of handling apparent reality is to follow this ethical code. And since in the Buddhist understanding there isn't a God, in the Buddhist religion understanding anyway, I'm not quite clear as the Buddha was so clear on that at all, but the Buddhist view, religion, the ethics has to be justified by a sort of logic. For instance, if you kill other people, they tend to avoid you, and this can be extremely costly since most of your benefits come from some sort of contact and relationship with society. You don't want to be an outcast. If you steal, likewise, they might not want your company. They won't risk you being a friend, and therefore you lose all the benefits of interpersonal joint activities, which are the bulk of our welfare. We tend to think imposed morality or rules or ethics. To some extent, the government does this. Says, if you steal, we imprison you, say. We give governments the monopoly of violence. We might claim that violent reaction to another person by an individual is not acceptable because it's not regulated and because it's not regulated by society and could be chaotic if everybody has vendettas and takes revenge and so on and so forth. So we've anathematized punishment, except in an authorized way. For instance, we put a fine on a person who speeds because speeding is not very, if you like, considerate of other people. You could kill them, yourself as well, of course. And other people don't like this. So we corporately, as a society, agree that you should be fined, say, or imprisoned. There's no question of the fine, in some sense, re-educating you, but simply keeping you constrained by a fear of being fined or imprisoned. In other words, it is a punishment. Ideally only as big as is necessary to achieve whatever good is achieved by it. If we now take into consideration that all is one in true reality, then perhaps in your mistaken apparent reality, you have to relate to such, in which case ethics are now extended to your relationship with this person. Of true reality, the one, you have a relationship to the true reality from your apparent false reality point of view. That's an interesting one. If, on the other hand, this is just not your view at all, then we have to argue moral principles on the grounds of pragmatism and self-interest. So we treat others as ourselves because this will bring you personally the greatest cooperation and benefit from others around you. And this buys you into, bribes you, pays you, rewards you for this moral behaviour. I've said elsewhere, haven't I, that if there is a heaven, a heavenly host, a family, a dimension in which you could live, well, you could only join it without ruining it if you're in harmony with it. In other words, we're back to ethics and how to behave, and you couldn't be given access to the place except you were going to behave reliably in the prescribed ethical way. And to have you value such ethics, you're in this world, in this classroom. That's my view, so to speak, of what the universe is about, time, space and matter. It's a great learning situation, and ideally you graduate to heaven, ideally with the minimal amount of apparent suffering here. Albeit temporary, we still want it minimized. The suffering, I mean. Right, let me review a minute. Yes, well, but if it's a closed system. If I think I'm in a world, there's no heaven, no God, no other dimension, there's just this life now. Well, of course, there will be circumstances in which murdering someone else is very beneficial to me, especially if it's not found out that I'm the guilty party. And, self-interest that's not discovered can be extremely successful in improving my own personal welfare. And because it's not discovered, there is a risk, of course, that it will be discovered, which might discourage me, especially if the punishment is horrendous. There's a 10% chance of finding out that I have killed these people, and the punishment is execution. Perhaps I don't really want to risk even a 90% success rate. The 10% failure weighs heavily on me. I worry about such, and if that's not enough, perhaps we need to have hung, drawn and quartered to the way in which you're going to be executed. In other words, I'm going to make it, there are ways of, and indeed, if we look at our history, that's what governments have done. In the modern world, we hope not to have that sort of extreme punishment system going on. But it looks as though we have to, as a consequence, put up with possibly a greater proportion of people breaking the moral code, and society has to take the cost of such undetected treason, if you like. So it's greatly in society's interest to have the notion of another world that you can graduate to, you know, heaven and hell possibilities. Heaven if you've been strictly good on the moral code, and hell if you haven't. And this isn't appealing to your better nature, this is simply appealing to your self-interest. But there is a better form of religion, of course, than simply a fear, helpful tool in the hands of society to control its citizens. There's a religion where it's understood that God loves you and is able and willing, therefore, to bless you according to your behavior, and even loves and cares for you despite your behavior, but we recognize is constrained not to give you a free rein in heaven, because you'd wreck the joint. So he has you here in this universe, modifying your behavior by learning, by observation, and by your experience. That seems to be a summary of all the possibilities, and this latter one being particularly good. After all, even if God doesn't exist, and there is no heaven, if we were a society of people that behaved as if there were such things, well, life would be a lot better. Not always. And not always for you individually. Because for you individually, your life might be a lot better not living in poverty at the minute, but stealing successfully, and well, your life will be better at the cost of other people. And you, of course, will not be taking this option if you are wedded to the God and heaven existing view. Strangely enough, it's not the poor person particularly that rejects the God-heaven view, but especially the rich, because they have much to lose in sharing it with the poor and being kind. The poor, on the other hand, have everything to gain by the rich acting in a generous way, and may feel morally right in cheating the rich out of what they don't wish to give away. If I can stand back from all this conjecture for a moment, do you see how this universe, especially of limited resources and uncertainty and ignorance, and apparent realities, necessarily generates what we take to be good and evil. And we're in a situation of experiencing its complexities of outcome and possibilities. In other words, it necessarily generates the medium or the class material that's part and parcel of our training. So what I'm moving towards is that there is no good solution for the existing order of society. We're not going to make heaven on earth because of the nature of scarcity, uncertainty, and ignorance, which generates these possibilities of good and evil being taken up. We are ever being presented with the nature and the outcome of these forces in our society, especially in relationship to our own narrow view. Now, what may well present as a hopelessness of this situation can result in a great desire for something better, a great desire to trust and believe in the existence of something better, and to follow after it. In other words, it generates in you a certain set of values that seem to be superior to what is actually being engendered by the society or world, universe, time, space and matter that you're in. I mean, quite simply, you want God and heaven to exist, and of a certain character, of course, goodness and loving kindness and ability and so forth. You've got the usual list for God, haven't you? Anyone can tell you what it would be. It's not that this world proves God exists. It simply demonstrates to you what you truly value. In large measure because you can't have it here. You've seen glimpses of it, but you cannot benefit from what you understand to be good fully in this dimension here. So you long for another, and you may therefore live in this environment, purposing good outcome in another, heaven. The perceived benefits of such to you being great, if the perceived cost to you, persecution and so on, of you living according to it, are not too great, then you will live accordingly. Isn't that interesting? Thank you, Dad.